So what we're going to do in this video is talk about how to figure out what you actually want to do with your life. The chances are is you've been asked this question before by your parents or your weird auntie or your grandmother or your friends or your teachers or your lecturers or someone like that, saying like, what do you actually want to do with your life? What are you going to do when you grow up? You know, and then they'll tell you that you can do anything, and they'll tell you that the world is your oyster and you can do anything you want. Well, as someone who's actually figured out what they want to do with their life at a relatively young age, unfortunately I fall into the Gen Z category, I'm going to share with you what I've learned and how I figured out what I want to do with my life and spend the rest of my life. And the thing is with most people, and the problem with most people's lives, is they have no sense of control. And what basically happens is one day when they're like 19 or 20, is they go to some careers advisor or they look at some job opportunity and they basically just let the universe serve them up some completely random opportunity that doesn't really have any resemblance to, you know, their interests or what they want to do. And then they take that opportunity, it could be like an apprenticeship or it could be like a university degree, and then they just float through life. It's like the river of life just takes them away. To use less of a cringy metaphor than that would probably be appropriate. But like, it's kind of like, if your life is kind of like, at a young age, it's like being in an airport. And you're in an airport, and if you don't know what your destination is, then you're not gonna board a plane that makes you happy. And you know, by the time you're like 50 or 60 years old, you're gonna end up in like Sierra Leone and be like, why the hell am I in Sierra Leone? I didn't want to be here. And it's because you didn't have the foresight to basically do it. By the way, look what arrived in the post. I just thought this was kind of cool. We got this a long, long time ago, but because we're in Dubai, it takes ages for anything to get delivered from the United States. This is my ClickFunnels award. Give me clout. Yeah, I made $10 million online. Validate me, trust me. Anyway, besides the point, none of that really matters, to be quite frank with you. But let's actually talk about how to do this, because I want to show you how I did it. Because if I can show you how I did it, then maybe you can do it as well. All right, so let's just hook up here. I'm going to get into the whiteboard. Okay. And then we're going to close the curtains so that you're not blinded. Stevie Wonder. Okay. So, like I said, most people don't know what they want. Most people have no idea what they want to do with their lives. And figuring out what you want to do with your life and figuring out how to become successful and happy and free and powerful and insert synonym to something that you might want here it's not about actually answering the question of what do you want to do. Because the problem is, sorry, let me just adjust my receding hairline here. The problem is that you aren't in a position to answer that question. And so what I'm going to do today is give you a simple framework of things that you need to get done in your life before you can actually start to even think critically enough or know yourself well enough to answer such a heavy, monstrous question. Asking an 18-year-old kid who is drinking, smoking, wanking, being an idiot, and just like, no, like, you get the whole like archetype that I'm talking about, right? The degenerate archetype. Not that you're a degenerate, but you probably have some degenerative behaviors. Asking a kid like that what they want to do with their lives is an impossible existential question for them to tackle, because A, they don't have the skills to even answer it, and B, they don't even know themselves. So what I'm going to do is walk you through how I did it, and it's going to change your life. At least it should give you some perspective on how to achieve this. And so it really is like a pyramid. And at the top here of the pyramid is where we have something called transcendence. Now, this is not some Maslow's hierarchy of needs BS. I'm going to actually give you my hierarchy of needs, okay? That's a very vain thing to say, but I think you get the point. So at the top here, we have transcendence. Now, let me go through some of these levels. Because really, to know what you want to do with your life, you kind of have to transcend yourself. And your goals and desires have to go above and beyond yourself and your own selfish needs. Anyone who's ever done anything great ever has completely transcended themselves and the thing in which they play, the game in which they play. And transcendence is an outcome of, you know, a confluence of variables. And so let's talk about how to do this. So at the base level of this pyramid, we have something called biological, can't even spell biology this morning, imperatives. So my point here is that there are rungs to this pyramid that you must climb and things that you must achieve and realize in your life before you can even start to answer the question of what do I want to do with my life. Because a biological imperative is in essence a facet of our nature that must be abided by. For example, sleep or food or water or shelter. These are the most imperative things to our body. And the point I'm making here is most of you should have these imperatives intact, but it's impossible to answer the question of what do you want to do with your life if you're worried about where the next meal is coming from. Because to answer this big question up here of what you actually want to do with your life, you need to allocate a ton of mental capital. And mental capital is basically like how much of your brain can you dedicate to this question? Because really you need all of your mental energy to answer such a strong and difficult question. And the problem is that if you don't have food or water or shelter, then what's going to happen is all of your time and energy will be focused on acquiring one of these three things. Now, there are other biological imperatives as well. For example, if you are sick and have a virus, or you have a really bad immunity, or you have the flu, you can't really think about tomorrow. You're just trying to survive today. If you're hungover, like any time that your biology is impaired or you're not taking care of your biology at a base sort of instinct level, then you're in trouble. And I know this to be true because there's a YouTube video of a tribe and like a hunting tribe in Africa, of an indigenous tribe. And it's one of the only indigenous tribes in the world that still, you know, lives through these biological imperatives and doesn't move up the rung, because that you kind of have no choice. And there's this clip of this dude, this sort of hunter-gatherer dude with these huge earlobe earrings, and he looks like a badass. And someone asks him, this dude behind the camera in this documentary, and they say, "What is the meaning of life to you?" And the guy is sort of scatting out, like, because this is obviously they're in the wild and stuff. And this dude turns around to the camera and says, like, "I think the monkeys have gone that way. Let's go and get them and eat them." Like, it's you can't even think about the question if you're thinking about these things. So number one is biological imperatives. Now, fortunate enough for you is you should have these things in check. If you are homeless and someone asks you what do you want to do with your life, the only thing you're going to answer is get off the street. If you are thirsty and you haven't had something to drink for 2 days and someone comes to you and says, "What's the meaning of life?" the only thing you're going to say is water. Your body will not give you a choice, okay? Now, the next rung up from here, I'm just going to draw a couple of these. The next rung up from biological imperative is health. And we're going to draw this in blue. So this is, I know this is a bit of a weird way to answer this question of like how to figure out what you want to do with your life. But the next thing like that sits on top of the biological imperatives is your health. If you are extremely unhealthy, if you have high levels of inflammation, if you have really weak immunity, if you get constant migraines, if you're tired all the time, if you have these massive insulin spikes and you're going up and down, if you have diseases or infections or recurring problems with your health, it's the same thing. You can't allocate mental capital to a question, or at least any form of capital in your body, when the majority of your energy is spent thinking about your health. And so this is the next thing that you have to square away. Now, you should already have these biological imperatives squared away. Some people I know sit like 5 hours a night, and then they get all anxious and depressed and weird, and they're like, "I don't know what I want to do with my life, it's chaos." It's like, mate, just try and figure out how to sleep first. But the next thing is your health, right? Because if you don't have a good, clean, healthy body, you're not going to have a good, clean, healthy mind. And I don't mean hygienically clean, you should have that anyway, right? But the point here is that the head, the brain, sits on top of the body. And it's kind of like, if it was a pyramid, you'd be building a house on sand, where the health of your brain is determined inherently by the health of the rest of your systems in your body. And you're not going to be able to figure out what you want to do with your life when you've got heart disease or when your lungs are full of tar. It's significantly harder because part of your brain and part of your biology is dedicated to solving these problems and figuring out how to basically have a stronger longevity so that you can reproduce. And so when people are asked the question, what do they want to do with their lives? If they've got health issues, they can't, it's impossible to think about that, at least in any way, shape or form, until you've got some baseline level of health. And becoming healthy is in my opinion, very, very straightforward. And it really just revolves around a couple of things. The first thing is sleep. The second thing is diet. The third thing is exercise. Now, there's some fourth things like water, sunlight, etc., etc. But, those are pretty self-explanatory. It's very simple. It's not hard. Like, if you can't figure this thing out, if you can't figure out how to be healthy and take care of your body, you don't deserve to climb the ladder. How the hell are you going to figure out what you want to do with your life if you can't figure out how to go to bed on time? So you need to solve these problems first. So just sleep 7 to 8 hours a night in a cold, dark room consistently at the same time. Diet. Stay away from processed foods, stay away from sugars, stay away from seed oils. A good diet is not about what you eat, it's about what you don't eat, okay? So instead of trying to have these fancy diets where you eat all these weird things like cacao nibs and you chew on charcoal and you drink whale sperm or whatever the hell people eat. I've seen people eating like poo these days. I mean, I'm not gonna judge what people want to do with their diet, but it's not about what you, that's serious by the way, that's called like fecal transfer, which is a fantastic marketing term for a disgusting idea. But anyway, enough of fecal transfer. Diet, it's just don't eat bad stuff. Don't eat stuff that you shouldn't eat, like crisps or chocolate or pizzas or burgers, at least not consistently. And then exercise, like just get out, go and touch some grass, go to the gym a couple of times a week, get your heart rate up, sweat. Like the body is about senescence, and senescence means you either use it or you lose it. So if you're not exercising your body's not gonna really want to do anything. So that's the next rung in the ladder. Now, following this, we have something that is really important, and that is relationships. Now, relationships are an interesting imperative because a lot of you think, oh, I don't need them. I'm this quirky alpha, sigma introvert who doesn't need to talk to anyone. I'm sorry, mate, but you do, all right? I don't care how much American Psycho you've watched. Unless you are actually a psychopath, which I hope you're not, you need relationships. And you don't need many relationships. Hell, you can just have like one. And what this basically means is your brain, at a biologically imperative level, needs to understand that you have someone that you can rely on. And this can be an intimate partner or a best friend or a family member. But once you've fixed your biological imperatives in your health, the next thing you need to focus on is relationships, because loneliness is, you can't really think about what you want to do with your life when most of your mental capital and energy is spent trying to just make some friends. And so you probably are in a position where you've got some relationships to some degree, but this isn't even like, even if you suck socially, you can still have your family members as friends. It's just someone to talk to. And it doesn't have to be a wife or a girlfriend or a long-term best friend. It could be someone you work with. It can be anyone, but you just need a couple of people that you know are in your corner. Now, I've got a fair few friends. I'm very blessed to work with my best friends. I've got incredible relationships with my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, and I've got lots of friends from back home. I've got lots of friends in my work. Like, I'm quite a social person, even though by nature I am introverted. And I can, I know how to talk to people, I know how to be social and stuff like that. And this is an important thing to learn how to do, because ultimately, if you haven't got relationships, like, what's the point in figuring out what you want to do with your life? Like, who the hell are you going to share it with? You're just going to be on your own. So you need these things. Now, after this, it gets a little bit more interesting, and this is where I'm going to have to grab my my notepad and my pen that I drew some fancy stuff on earlier. Okay. So after this, we get to some interesting topics, to say the least. And we're going to talk about these in a lot of detail and a lot of depth, because most people who I know who are entrepreneurs, They have their biological imperatives together. They have their health together, and they have their relationships together. But then there are two traps, right? This is like a game of snakes and ladders, okay? Once you get past here, there are there's ladders you've got to climb, right? But on these ladders are snakes. Spooky, scary, hissing snakes. And as you're climbing towards transcendence, there are two echelons of spirituality, to use a lack of a better word, that you have to climb through. And it's like a trap. They are very significantly going to trap you if you don't know what's going to happen. And the chances is that if you've got these three things and you don't have this thing, then one of these two things is trapping you and you're not even aware of it. When I figured this thing out, I was like, oh my God, I get it now. Because when I was trapped at these 2 points, and when I figured out how to transcend them and undo the trap, I literally came up with the vision for my life and my 50-year goal, which is to revolutionize business education and to make it so that every entrepreneur who wants to be successful is. That's kind of like my vision and my mission. And it took me 2 years to come up with that. But it was because I was trapped in these things. So let me share some 26-year-old Gen Z dodgy wisdom with you, all right? Okay, so now it's time for the big guns. Pay attention to this because this will get you as you become successful. Because if you really want it, you'll have it, and these things will get you. Okay. Let's just do this. Sorry. Okay. So, here, we have freedom. And then here, we have status. So let's just start with some definitions, okay? This is, trust me, it might not seem like much now, but once I've explained it, this should hopefully blow your mind and change your life. So once you have attended to your biological imperatives, once you've attended to your psychological imperatives, once you're healthy, once you've got a good life and your body's being taken care of, it really, for a man, I can't talk about women because this is not my experience, I'm just a dude that figured this out, right? So I don't know if girls have it differently. But really what happens here, as a man, is you crave two things, okay? You really want one of two things, and probably usually both. The first thing that you want is freedom. If I ask any entrepreneur, early stage entrepreneur, not a late stage entrepreneur because they transcend this. If I ask any early stage entrepreneur, what do you want to do with your life? Why do you want to start your business and make 10K a month or get 50K a month? Why do you want to do this? The answer is almost always freedom. And this is freedom in terms of, you can see down here, this is financial freedom. This is time freedom. And this is location freedom. These are the three forms of freedom that people want to achieve. Now, this is fine, because this is probably why you're working. But here's the thing, is it once again comes down to the fact that this is a trap. And you won't be able to see this until you have it. Because once you start making half decent money, you will be free, right? You will, once you start making like 6 figures, even 5 grand a month by yourself, 6 grand a month, 10 grand a month, even 3 grand a month, right? Now you have financial freedom in not necessarily like a couple of grand a month, but you can go where you want on your own clock. You don't have to have an alarm. You don't have to, go anywhere you don't want to go. You don't have a boss, and you're free. And that's great, but it's a fucking trap. And here's why. So once you acquire this freedom, freedom becomes incredibly, incredibly addictive. And I see this constantly where all these dudes, all these young entrepreneurs, some of my clients included, they're obsessed with traveling. And they're obsessed with going around these different locations in the world for their Instagrams and networking and flying around and seeing people and just being free. And if they want that in their hearts of hearts, and that's what they want to build their life around, that's absolutely fine. I have no quarrel with it. But a lot of these guys that have this freedom to go where they want, when they want, without having to worry about the money behind it, they get lost. It's a vice. They end up just traveling. One minute they're in South Africa, then they're in Bali. I mean, these are the locations that really get people because, like, objectively speaking, these entrepreneurs who make a little bit of money don't really have much money in the West. And so they go to places, they do obviously, if you make it 10 grand a month or 20, 30 grand a month in the West, you're still in the top 1%. But you can't, like, one Airbnb in London is going to wipe out like half of your income for just like 5 days, if it's really nice. And I know that to be true because they're bloody expensive, right? So what these guys do is they go to be free in Bali or South Africa, Thailand's another one, Vietnam. They go to these second or third world countries that in essence, they can spend their money and it goes further and they live like a king. And it also feeds into status as well, because these guys do this so that they can put stuff on their Instagram. Do not flex your South African villa on me. It's cheap, all right, brother? It's a 8-bedroom villa, and it's like, it's not even that expensive. Like, it's not that impressive. It's impressive to anyone, any normal human, any average person is gonna be like, whoa, that's a cool villa. I know how much they cost. I know how much these guys make. It's not hard to make that much money once you figure these things out. So I'm not impressed. And I'm not judging them for this. I'm just trying to, if this is you, please listen, because you're not gonna figure out what you want to do with your life and transcend yourself and allocate your mental capital to your goal if you're just traveling all the time. And I know this to be true because I literally did this. So when I started making 10 grand a month, I went interrailing and I went traveling and I went to all these different cities and locations, months on end of just random travel. And I still travel from time to time now, like, but it's mainly always for work, really. Unless I'm going on holiday, then sure. But basically, you want to figure out how to set a location free, like you want to just set a location and work there. Because until you get this out of your system, and until you get this desire and obsession for freedom out of your system, you're never going to transcend it. The ladder, you can never climb a ladder for as long as you're clinging onto the side of the rungs as much as you possibly can. Because really, what freedom means above everything is control. If we think about this from a first principles perspective and ask ourselves, what really is freedom? Well, it's having control over your life. And we could almost replace this with control. And the thing is that if you're just trying to constantly control everything in your life, then you're not going to be able to transcend and find something bigger than you, because your obsession is about controlling your own life. It's a selfish intent. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not judging those guys that go to Bali and South Africa on these little networking holidays, but I know that none of them are actually truly content and happy with their lives. None of them truly feel fulfilled. And even if they do, it's temporary fulfillment. And I've been there myself, so I know it is. Like, it's temporary fulfillment. A new location offers a novelty that counteracts and acts as an antidote to the loneliness and meaninglessness of making money and being an entrepreneur. That's the easiest and most articulate way for me to put that. And Seneca wrote this in his Letters from a Stoic. Verbatim, I won't quote him because I can't remember the quote, but in Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, one of the Greek philosophers, absolute genius, he said that when you, like a man who travels a lot, it demonstrates not for like business or work, there's something wrong with him, because when you travel, the common denominator of, like, if this is location 1 here, and this is location 2, and this person here is unhappy in location 1, then what's going to happen is person's going to move from location 1 to location 2. And then maybe they're going to move from location 2 to location 3. And the thing is this person's going to travel here, right? And temporarily they will be happy. And this is what Seneca was saying. But the problem is someone's happiness and someone's contentness in life is not determined by the physical substructure of their environment. Unless, of course, you're in like a war-torn country, you're probably going to be quite happy. If you're just bouncing around the world, you're taking your sorry body and sorry mind with you. It doesn't go away. Like when you travel and you move to a new location and it's novel and fresh, you feel great for like a week or two, and then all of your depressions and anxieties and misalignments set back in. So then what happens again is you move somewhere else and you go to location 3. And then for a while you're happy, but remember, you've taken your sorry body and mind with you. And so the common denominator of your life is your body and your mind, and that's the thing that's going to determine whether you're happy or not the damn villa you're in. Trust me, I've been in these villas and I've been on those holidays and I've been to these exotic locations, and it's all good and well and it looks amazing and the infinity pool's cold and you get some cigars and it's all fun. And then you go to bed and it's 11:30 p.m. and all you're doing is making money and you don't really have any true sense of purpose, meaning or direction. You have no trajectory long-term to offset all of your suffering and work, but you just choose to ignore it. I've done it. I know you've done it if you're one of these dudes. I promise, I know what it's like. So Seneca basically said this, he was like, when you travel, you take your sorry body and mind. He wasn't exactly what he said, but like a man who goes to a different location takes himself with him and you take all of your problems with you. You travel with your problems. It's a cope. It's like drinking alcohol. If you have problems and you drink, you forget them for 12 hours, but then you wake up the next day and here they come. The same thing is true with traveling. You travel, you get to your location, it's novel, you forget your problems. I'm being free, I'm free, I've got control, and then in comes the suffering, right? So it sounds great, the laptop lifestyle. And that's really what this manifests as, is the laptop lifestyle. You want it, I used to want it, everyone wants it. You know, go and sit on a beach and blah, blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, like having freedom is amazing. Like being able to go where you want, when you want, without any financial restrictions is absolutely wonderful and fantastic. But it should be the exception in your life and not the rule. And the hilarious thing, and I can tell you this to be true because I've done it, the hilarious thing is you want to have the financial freedom, but the people that have actually achieved stuff in this industry and the people that I've seen that have actually achieved it is, it's just once you actually have the option, like freedom is about having the choice. It's not about actually doing it, it's about having the choice to do it. So I always used to want the laptop lifestyle. I did it for like 3 months when I started making 6 figures and then I stopped doing it because I was like, this is just dumb. But now I have the choice and that's enough because what it represents, remember, is control. And control is about being able to choose what you do and do not do without anyone telling you what you can and can't do. And now, if I want to, I can go to Bali and spend like a couple of grand on a villa for a week, or I can go to South Africa, or I can go to America. I can go anywhere when I want, with who I want, on my own terms, without worrying about the money or the location or the time. I can do whatever the hell I want. And when you have that option, that's enough. It's the sense of control that matters, not the actual physical manifestation of it. Just having it should make you feel like, oh, okay, I'm good now. And because I would rather work than travel and be free. And to me, the purest form of freedom and the purest form of control is my work. I feel so free and I feel like I have so much control when I'm working. Work makes me feel more free than anything else because I'm free to do what I want and I'm literally free to decide what direction I want to take my company in, how I want the culture to be, what goals we're setting, what we're working on. That's freedom. But the thing is when you don't love your work, all of that freedom gets channeled into traveling as opposed to building. And so you have to learn how to transcend the desire to travel. And you don't have to do this yet. You kind of have to go through it to realize that it's purposelessness and it's meaninglessness. But if you don't love your work and you're not working on the right stuff, then ultimately you're going to have this manifest in the form of your location changing all the time and your Instagram feed looking somewhat pretty so that maybe a nice girl will reply to you. It's sad and it's true because I've done it and I know it to be true. I'm not pointing fingers or judging. I'm just telling you what my experience is and how I got out of this trap. And this is the problem, is if you take an anecdote from Pinocchio, in Pinocchio, there's a place called, in like the story of Pinocchio, there's a place called Pleasure Island. And Pleasure Island is basically a archetypal substructure of the unconscious that basically represents this physical island that Pinocchio and people can go to. And it's kind of like the Lotus Hotel, right? No, it might not be the Lotus Hotel. But anyway, Pleasure Island, Pinocchio or some dude in the story goes to this island, and the island, there's no pain. There's no suffering, there's no anxiety, there's no depression, there's none of that. It's just pure pleasure. Everyone's having a great time. Everyone's like, if you think of the Barbie movie recently, it's kind of like Barbie's world. I haven't actually watched it, but from my understanding of the archetype, it's the same thing. Where in Barbie's world, everything's perfect. Like no one's in any sort of trouble or suffering. And then like time goes quickly and everyone's just having a great time and there's no pain. And basically on Pleasure Island, what happens is it's a trap. Like, it'll get you, because on Pleasure Island, the only rule is you can't grow. And so if we look at the Barbie movie, for example, and the archetype behind this is, my understanding of the movie is she's in her Pleasure Island little, you know, golden prison, so to speak, where everything's amazing. But then she has a problem or something, and she has to go to the real world to solve that problem where pain and suffering exists. And it's fine being on Pleasure Island if you want to be there for the rest of your life, but just remember that if there's no pain and if there's no suffering, then there's no growth. And that's the point. Is the freedom thing is Pleasure Island. Going to all these locations, seeing these OnlyFans models on boats, drinking, having a great time with your friends, like that's for a holiday, man. And just having the choice to do that should be enough. You have to learn to tame this beast, otherwise it's going to get you. If you are traveling all the time, if you're taking your remote on Instagram and you're thinking you're all cool and stuff, it's going to get you. Now I have to go and let the cleaners in, so you know what, you can come with me. Why the hell not? After such a philosophical rant, I think we both deserve a little bit of a break. The cleaners are going to think I'm absolutely weird vlogging this. Hi guys, come in. All right, let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. All right, so that's a little interlude. I think you get the point. Do not stay on Pleasure Island. Having the option to do it should be enough. And that's that, okay? The other thing with Pleasure Island is time passes really quickly. And like, it's kind of like if you're on the island and you come off of it, you don't realize how much time has passed because of how pleasurable it is. And you're not gonna build anything on Pleasure Island, so don't even try. Okay, so now that we've got that slight existential thing out of the way, we can move on to the next thing, which is even more dangerous, which is status. And so once you've accepted that you're not going to build anything from a beach in Bali, which is kind of the point here, like if you're traveling all the time and constantly changing your time zone and your biological clock and your hormones are all over the place and the food you're eating is inconsistent and the water you're drinking, like it's impossible for your biological imperatives, health and relationships to be like sustained when you're just moving around all the time. You just can't do it, okay? So the next thing, the next rung up from freedom, which we're going to call, we're going to call this trap number 1, and it's a trap because like it's what you think you want, and you do want it, and it's going to get you, and you're going to get to this point, and you're going to climb a ladder, and the snake's going to come and bite you. You're going to fall down. The next thing is status. Okay. So I figured out the freedom thing a while ago, and it took me like maybe a year to shake off this freedom thing and to climb the ladder and to kill the snake and be able to climb to the next rung, which is even harder to overcome. Trust me, this thing is extremely difficult to transcend. But once again, I kind of figured out how to transcend it. Not completely. I still have, being honest with you, I still have psychological remnants of status and trying to prove myself better than other people. Like it manifests in certain ways, but I've got a firm grip on it now, and I've got some level of deep control over my desire to seem better than other people. But once someone transcends the freedom thing, the thing is these two things, they go hand in hand. So like I said earlier, if these entrepreneurs are traveling and being free and having financial freedom, they're usually talking about it on their Instagram, on their TikTok, and they're usually telling everyone how great their life is, which is a sad thing to do, right? Even though I've been doing that for the last half an hour, but you get the point. Like usually the freedom and the status thing, they come hand in hand. But anyway, let's talk about status. So really, how does status manifest? Let's talk about this. Let's get concrete first of all. Well, it manifests in cars, it manifests in watches, it manifests in houses, it manifests in social media, it manifests in women, it manifests in like yachts, it manifests like all sorts of different things. It will manifest in any physical representation of status is going to like manifest as status. And we need once again a first principle and a definition of status. Like what really is it? Well, really what it is it is a perception of power. So status in your brain, you have a chemical called serotonin. And serotonin is the, happy chemical. Now, you might all know this. You might all think, well, hang on, dopamine's the happy chemical. They're interchangeable, right? Dopamine is like for reward. Serotonin is more for social measurement. And what basically your brain will do is in your mind, you have this serotonin system. And based on your own personal perceived level of status, which basically means how high above men in your life you are, or how below them you are, will regulate your serotonin levels and make you feel good or bad. So, for example, if you perceive yourself as better, and I'm just going to be frank, better than other people, not morally or virtuously, but in terms of measurements of wealth, health, achievement, etc., then you will basically be happy. And if you perceive yourself to be lower than your social circle and people in your social circle, or people that you know, then you will be unhappy. And so, I can give you a personal example here. If I am, I bought a car. I had a C63 AMG back in the UK. And it was a nice car, and I love the car. I spent a lot of money on it. And I would drive the car around like an idiot and I would just obviously go to the gym and drive around and stuff. I would drive around and people would look at this car. And what that basically did was, first of all, it gratified a childlike desire for attention that I have, which we'll talk about another day. But second of all, what it did is it made me feel like I had status, because I did. By buying the vehicle and driving the vehicle and presenting this shiny object to other human beings, my perceived level of social status was increased. Because that car costs a lot of money, and the reason that status is important to us and the reason it drives most of our behavior as men is because it demonstrates, the car demonstrates a concentration of resources. Because Paleolithically, when we were living on the African plains or the Eurasian steppe or whatever, the guy who you wanted in your tribe and the guy who you wanted to be around was the guy who had the most resources. It was the guy who was most competent and the guy who could hunt and gather, or probably hunt, in the most effective way possible. Because if you come back from a hunt and there's 10 tribes go out to hunt and one tribe comes back, or one dude comes back with 3 massive deers over his shoulders, or that he's been able to hunt loads of meat, then that guy has the most status. And what it is it's a signal of competence, and it's a signal of I'm better than you. And it is because he is better than you. If you go out to hunt consistently, and another dude goes out to hunt consistently, and that dude always comes back with 5 times the food that you always come back with, he's better at you, he's better than you at providing for the tribe and for the family. And therefore that guy has elevated status. And so we are biological machines, and we have this measurement system in our brains, and how we treat people and how we talk to people will also be influenced by this system. Primary example, if I get recognized by a subscriber, which doesn't happen often, but it happens irregularly, they treat me way nicer than they would just treat a random stranger. And that's because in their mind, I have elevated status because they either know how much money I make or they see how many subscribers I have. And that just happened. And so status is basically a measurement of where do you sit in the social hierarchy? And the way that we do this is we want it. Human beings as dudes, oh God, boy, oh boy, do we want this thing. We want status, we want it really badly. And I'm actually gonna just put a word here. This is just remembered. Okay. So the way that this works is, like I said, you have a serotonin system in your brain, and if you want to understand this in a little bit more detail, go and read the first chapter of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, because this thing has existed for billions of years, and he'll explain it in with way more verbal fluency than I just have. But we have these measurements. We have, am I above people? Am I below people? It's a perception of power. It's am I better than you? Am I not better than you? Back to the car thing, I would drive the car, people would look at the car, guys would come up and take pictures of it, people would say, what do you do for a living? This gives me a massive serotonin boost because it makes me perceive myself to be better than other people. And I'm not better than other people in terms of morals or virtue or values and what really matters about a person. is their like value system, belief system and stuff. And I'm not better than them in that regard, but in terms of financial achievement and the accumulation of wealth at that age, I am better than them. And that might come across as a significantly like narcissistic, egotistical thing to say, but objectively, if you have more money than somebody else, then in that realm of human achievement, you are better than them. The same way that if someone is healthier than me, then they are better than me in that realm of human achievement. We're not just better than people because we have money or because we're healthy. In my eyes, what makes a human being good or bad is their value and belief system and how rigidly they stick to it. That's what I think makes a good person a good person. But there are other pockets of, achievement that, that we can do. For example, if someone, like I can swim, but I'm not like a professional swimmer. If I come across a professional swimmer, then they are better than me at professional swimming. And it's the same thing with money, with health, with relationships, socializing, etc., etc. So how the hell does this matter to you? Well, I can tell you right now that you're never going to get rid of this thing. You're always going to want status. It's never going to go away. You're always going to want to buy things. You're always going to want to have material displays of wealth. You're always going to want a nice car or a nice watch or a nice house. You're going to want to have your social media profiles to show people that you've got these things. And on top of that, you're going to want to start having more beautiful women. You're going to want to go on yacht parties and stuff like that. Because these are all symbols of status. Because if you really think about it, these are basically representation of resource. Because as a man, sadly enough, for a lot of people, myself included up until a certain point, and still I'm kind of broken in this regard, and I'm just being honest with you, what's the point in having resources if you don't represent them? That's the point. It's kind of like, and that's not a rhetorical question, by the way. I've been working on this for a long time. Like, I've got a lot better with my purchasing decisions and doing stupid shit just to prove that I have money. Like, I deleted my own personal Instagram. I don't flex anything on TikTok or anything like that. I actually got rid of my car. I don't buy any watches. I wear $10 t-shirts. Yes, I have the house, but I'm working on it, all right? So you get the point. But really, status is a perception of power. So what's going to start to happen here is once you get past the freedom thing, because freedom usually comes before status, because this is usually the base desire that people really want. And once they have the freedom, what they want to do is they want the next thing to compete with, which is like, oh, what do I want now? It's like, okay, I want a car. So most people have two motivations, one or two motivations, or both of them at the beginning of their business journey. The first one is the laptop lifestyle and the financial freedom and the location freedom, which manifests as freedom. The second one is I want to buy a Lamborghini, or I want to buy a Rolex, or I want to buy this house, or I want to have this woman, or I want to do this thing, or buy this thing, or have this apartment. And what that is it's a manifestation of a desire for status. And status is a desire for a manifestation of power. And so what we're really looking at here is two things that you want. You want control and you want power. Control, power, control, power, control, power, control, power. Those are the two things that you want. And if you're not careful, as you become more successful, status will trap you. It will really trap you. Your life will start to become about proving and trying to be better than other people and demonstrating your representation of the resources that you've acquired. And some people, they never get out of this thing. They never escape it. They never, like Mike Tyson, for example, had a hell of a boxing career, and then he started buying tigers and stuff like that. Like, he bought so much stuff and had so much status that the only way that he could keep out competing with himself was by buying a tiger and by buying more things. And he spent like hundreds of millions of dollars in just a few years on all this random stuff. And it'll get you. I promise it will. But you kind of have to go through it, as I have, to then realize it doesn't really matter. So the question then becomes, okay, I'm now cognizant and aware of these traps and these problems, but how do I surpass them to transcend? Well, let me explain. Okay. Let me explain this to you. Okay. The truth is that you can never really, I mean, at least in my opinion, if you're like a religious, spiritual figure, then maybe you can do this. the truth is that as a dude, in my experience, and I might not be right here, but this is what I believe to be true at the current present moment in time, different information might change my mind in the future, but the truth is that you can never really transcend wanting freedom and wanting status. These things, like the want for power and the want for control, are so deeply embedded into the collective unconscious, which basically means everyone wants them. And they're so deeply connected to our biology and what we truly want in our hearts of hearts that you can never really transcend them. But what you can do is you can channel them. And so what this means is that instead of channeling your desire for freedom and channeling your desire for status into trips and cars and Instagram accounts and stuff like this, if you resist the temptations, the low-hanging fruit of the manifestations of these two things, and you resist, it's kind of like you've got a bucket here, and in this bucket is loads of water, okay? And this is your energy in essence, okay? This is your energy, and your energy as an entrepreneur is coming from your desire for status and freedom. And if you buy a car, a fancy car, a little bit of this energy spills out because now you've gratified these two things, okay? And if you come over here and you start going to Bali every 2 months, a little bit of energy has spilled out here. And this thing, every time we open it up slightly, if we come over here and we gratify our status in some way, and we come over here and we gratify our freedom in some way, in terms of you're going to South Africa or then you're posting on Instagram, your energy starts to deplete. And this energy is in essence what I mentioned earlier, which is capital. It's you need this thing. And so what you want to do with these things is you want to plug these status and freedom holes in your life and refuse to give in to your childish desires for these two things. And then what you do is you plug these gaps and you keep all your energy and then you channel it. So instead of sending this energy off in 100 different directions to 100 different vices, what you do is you take it and you give it to work. And then what you do is you start to see your status and your freedom manifest in your work. This is what I mentioned earlier. And this is how you transcend. This is how you do it. These are incredibly strong sources of energy. And energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transferred. And what this means is we can't get rid of these desires here, it's impossible. But what we can do is we can transfer them into a different bucket or a different part of life that will make us way more successful. And so what I now like to do is I get my freedom from my work. So for example, today, if I want to sit down and make a YouTube, no one can tell me what to do. I can build whatever I want to build. I can do whatever I want to do with my work, and I can hire who I want to hire. I can create my own culture. I have total freedom in terms of my work. And because I see this freedom manifest in my work, and because I'm working on something that I actually care about, I don't feel the need to go to all these different places. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who lives in the UK, and he's building a course. And he was like, oh dude, I just need to go to Thailand to get out of this place. I need to be free for a couple of weeks. I was like, you don't get it. If you refuse that impulse and you literally refuse and say no to that impulse, then what's going to happen is that energy has to be sent somewhere. It has to go somewhere. So if you don't go to Thailand and you refuse it, that energy is bursting at the seams, it will go into your work. It will go to the only place that you leave it to go to. Same with status. So the funny thing is that if you don't try to symbolize your resources and status, you end up having more of it because A, you're not competing, and B, it's the same thing. If you resist the impulse to buy a watch or buy a car, and your brain knows that the only way that you're going to have status is through your work and what you've achieved, then that's what's going to happen. It's going to make sure that is what happens. And so, for example, I make these YouTube videos. I make them pretty raw. We don't edit them. Sure, you see the house at the beginning. I live here. Of course, I'm going to use the house as a vehicle for you to sustain your attention. Because sadly, well, it's not sad. It's just called the authority bias. If I have what you want, you'll pay more attention to what I say. It's that simple, which is why I show the house, okay? But other than that, I've got a Rolex, I don't have a Lamborghini, I don't have like 5 models waiting for me after this video. I don't have anything that you would want that symbolizes status. What I do have is a sick business and a sick team and an incredible company culture and an incredible vision. And so I now get I have to get this from somewhere. It has to come from somewhere. I can't just get rid of the desire for status, that's impossible. But what I can do is put it into my work. And so now I can say, I make $10 million a year online. And I could say that, but like if I got caught in the status trap, all I'd be able to say is, oh, I've bought a Lamborghini, or oh, I'm in South Africa now. And I'd rather be able to say I've made $10 million a year online. And I don't do anything with that money. I just 50% profit margins, so like 5-6 million a year in profit. And I don't buy shit. I don't buy cars or watches or anything like that, because I know that in the long term, I'm going to have a ridiculous level of status just by being a billionaire. And the only way I'm going to be a billionaire is if I'm financially sensible and I do not give in to these pathetic childlike vices that I crave and desire. And I'm not calling them pathetic or childlike to judge people, but I'm just saying that that's what they are. Pathetic might be a little bit harsh, but if you really think about it and you really think about why you want to do that Instagram post, like I used to have a personal Instagram that I'd flex on my old friends to. Right? I had like a couple of thousand followers from like college and school when I was growing up. And I had nothing growing up. Like I came from a middle-class family, we were fine. But I didn't have any status growing up. Actually, I had the opposite, I had anti-status. I was bullied in school. In college, I was this little weird like dude. I just didn't have anything going for me. And so I kept having this urge, it's gone now, but I kept having this urge to go on my personal Instagram where all of those old people followed me and post my house and my car and like my Stripe screenshots. It's pathetic. It's really pathetic. And I'm talking to myself here. I'm not calling you pathetic. I'm observing that my perception of that behavior is rather pathetic, because what you're trying to do is desperately endow yourself with the validation of people who you don't even like or care about. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But my point is that for as long as this desire is manifesting in that way, it cannot manifest in this way. And so my status now comes from me building this YouTube channel, me building my company, and eventually I will have more status than all of these people because I will have achieved more. And remember that status is about competence. It's about resources display competence, right? But really, like, that's kind of how it works. And so after a while, once you tame these two beasts and you learn how to channel them into your work, you can achieve transcendence. And at this point, you can then ask yourself, what do I want to truly do with my life? Because your life is no longer about taking care of your biology. It's no longer about making sure that you're healthy. It's no longer about making sure you've got some steady relationships. Your life is not about desperately trying to control all the variables around you or trying to prove that you have more power than people. Like, your life becomes about your work. And when you do this, of course you can answer the question. Like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I want to work on something that changes the world. And that's how I did it. It took me 8 years to figure this out. And it took me 18 months to, like, it took me like, okay, so it took me a good 8 years to figure this out. It took me like 2 years to figure this thing out, and another 2 years to figure this thing out. Like, these are beasts. But over time, you learn and you get smarter. And that's how I figured out what I want to do with the rest of my life. Once you clear out all of this crap, channel these two things into work, then you can have a serious conversation with yourself. Because if you don't feel like you have status and you don't feel like you have freedom, your entire life becomes about trying to achieve those things. And so if you do have them, and then they're manifesting in the wrong way, so either you don't have them, or you do in the wrong way. So if you don't have status or freedom, then your life and your achievements will be about trying to get those two things. For example, I want to make 10K a month so I can go and travel the world. Freedom, desire. Or I want to make 10K a month so I can rent a Ferrari. Status, desire, right? So if you don't have them, you're going to try and get them. But if you do have them, the chances are they're going to manifest in the wrong way. For example, I want freedom, so I'm going to go and live in these exotic locations and just travel around the world all the time and just work for my laptop. Or I want status, so I'm just going to go and buy cars and rent Ferraris. But if you have them in the right way, then you can start asking yourself the question, because once you have these things in the wrong way, you will just continuously reinforce that loop, and that's all you're going to want. But once you transcend them, then you have all of your mental capital going into your work, and then you can do what I did, which is basically spend a year asking yourself the question, what's the point of me being here? Like, okay, now that I've had the house and the cars and the girls and the watches and the like Instagram fame and this, that, and the other, once I've had all that, and once I've had the option to travel and be free, what's the point? Okay, well, I know what it is. It's about actually becoming more successful and building what I want. No, thank you, man. We're good. So, yeah, that's basically how to just tell the cleaner they want to clean this room. But that's how you transcend this thing, and that's how you figure out what you want to do with your life. Whew. Hope it helps. See you later.